Hey, Dad, make sure you wipe off the grease on our heads. Yeah, we were eating a bunch of meat the past few days. I've been on a mostly meat diet. It's been helping with my diet, but let's just say other issues have arisen.
And I just like barbecue and meat.
Yeah. So we got about 4 or 5 pounds of grilled smoked meat from Hard 8 the other night, and I'm still feeling it. Hey, so Daddy, you wanted to talk about it's the Cargil
Yes.
case? Yeah. So my understanding is he didn't agree with some things ATF wrote, and ATF thinks that they can write law, clearly. So, but you had written an amicus briefing before?
Correct.
Yeah. So sort of go into the details of like what the case involved and how it may apply to some of your broke gun tubers out there.
Well, the Cargill was the plaintiff, and he was used to sue ATF, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, on behalf of the firearms industry.
Okay.
So
A Cargill is a gun seller?
he's here in Texas.
Okay, gotcha.
And so on behalf of the case, as it got closer, because I always work with the Gun Owners of America, and I do this for free. So my writing has been on every major case that's gone in front of the Supreme Court: bump stock, arm brace, FRT, and now this case. And this one I wrote a complete amicus brief with the support of a law firm I won't mention, who they did all of the cleanup, all of the graphics to make it look really professional. Obviously, I'm a technical person, and these guys were the glamour guys. So it goes to the Supreme Court, and they have a hearing. And the basis of this, as more and more firearms are being discovered that are made from what's called an 80% receiver and a set of parts, and there's no such thing as an 80% receiver. It's just a receiver that hasn't been completed to extent that it could be considered a firearm. So ATF wrote a regulation that said if I have an 80% receiver in possession with a set of tools and parts to put that together, then it became a firearm receiver. So I now possessed a firearm receiver without doing any work.
So almost like I would compare it to if you Googled how to rob a bank, and then they went to your house and found that you had a ski mask and a gun and some zip ties.
That's a good analogy, because they could say you're now a bank robber, even though you hadn't robbed a bank.
Crime. Yeah.
I hadn't put anything together, but I'm in possession of a firearm because I have the equipment to put a firearm together.
The potential crime, sort of a minority report. Thought, it's a precognition that you might commit a crime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank God
Hey, Dad,
minority
don't
report.
tap the table.
Thank God minority report isn't real.
If the government could have it real, they would be.
So the Fifth Circuit overturned ATF's rule. ATF appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court stayed the Fifth Circuit. So now it's going to go to the Supreme Court. So that's when I wrote the amicus brief. It goes to the Supreme Court, and unfortunately, the government won. And I have to give credit to the government attorney. She did a good job. And one of the things that hurt the Second Amendment side, the gun owner side, is since 1968, as part of the statute, ATF has been classifying firearms that were made from starter guns as firearms. So everybody goes, well, starter gun, a blank firing gun, how do I turn that into a blank firearm? Well, the European countries don't have the strict requirements on starter guns that we do. Mm-hmm. Actually, the Russians will take Tokharovs and Makarovs and weld a pin through the barrel so they'll only shoot blanks, and then sell them to the European community, and then they immediately convert them back into firearms.
So kind of like just a loophole they can
get
firearms over there. Yeah.
Prior to 1968, all of these starter guns were coming into the United States. They were basically firearms. You drill a hole through the barrel, you drill a hole through the cylinder, and you could shoot a firearm. A round of ammunition as a firearm.
Gotcha.
So they used that historical foundation, and I wrote opinions on that when I was a firearms enforcement officer with ATF. So, and I testified in a trial where a guy was convicted of using a starter gun that he had converted to rob a church of all things. And they used that and did a good job. So the Supreme Court actually looked at that and said, hold up. You know, Cargil's side is saying these are not readily convertible. But ATF has been saying since 1968, these starter guns are convertible in less than 45 minutes, but I can turn this 80% polymer receiver into a firearm in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I hate to say it, but that's why we lost. And I say we, the gun side. But that's not important because I can still make a firearm for myself.
Yeah.
I can still make and sell a firearm to you as an individual. And I'm not required to serialize it. I'm not required to mark it. What's important is the hidden landmines in this rule. So I'm going to talk about two of those landmines.
Okay.
Everybody knows what checkering is on a firearm. That's where you cut the little lines in front of the receiver, give you a good grip. In 2010, with acting director Mike Sullivan, we had a battle about what is considered manufacturing and what is considered gunsmithing. And I'm going to try to clarify this because we only have so much time.
Okay.
If you bring me a gun, an individual brings a gunsmith a gun, I can do anything I want to on your behalf because you're the owner. But if I buy guns and I start pulling barrels and put new stocks, now I'm considered a manufacturer. So it's kind of, you split hairs. So because of anti-gun attorneys, which are some of them are still there, and I hope in this purge they're going to be gone, they started calling bluing, checkering, all these things manufacturing. So we had a big battle. And
So they consider even cosmetic things to be manufactured?
yes.
Okay.
So no one thinks this is important except the firearms industry. Everybody doesn't do all of the services in-house. So let's say I'm Colt, and I don't want a blue in-house. So Rick's got this great bluing facility down the road, and Rick's a gunsmith. So I send all those guns to Rick to blue. ATF attorneys said, since that's part of the final manufacturing process, we're going to call bluing manufacturing.
But Dad, what's so stupid about that is if some, cholo from South LA buys a Camaro and does his airbrushing on the hood, that you wouldn't consider that manufacturing. You consider it detailing an art, yeah.
So this is all just ATF attorneys wielding their clout. So we had a big battle, and we wrote a ruling, 2010-10, and I did the majority of the ruling. Of course, the technical part, I always say the technical part, because you have to have writer editors to make it look good.
Yeah.
And it went, and Director Sullivan signed it. So since then, engraving, no matter who it was done for, was only considered gunsmithing. So these guys who do engraving set up their own businesses. And I'm going to use Colt again because this is real. I won't mention the person. So there's a person in Maryland who's got a lucrative business doing all Colt's custom engraving. And he set up a program on his CNC machine, and the engraving is beautiful and perfect. And he's got all these small manufacturers having engraving done by him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all great. Even if they said you have to be a licensed manufacturer, that's great too, unless you live in a communist state.
Like Maryland.
And he lives in a communist state called the communist state of Maryland. Maryland says, if you're a licensed manufacturer, today I can be a gunsmith, have all my equipment. Tomorrow I get a licensed manufacturer in 07, have the same equipment. I have to be in a commercial district or business district. What gunsmith can afford it?
Yeah, I mean, considering that I would say the majority of gunsmithing actually happens within people's own homes. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm a licensed manufacturer in my home in North Carolina. North Carolina does not make me go to a business district. And I'm a licensed manufacturer simply because I receive samples from industry members and from, I don't do sales. So I'm a licensed manufacturer simply for that. So this individual just lost a lucrative contract from Colt, the majority of his money from one manufacturer, and he's lost it from other manufacturers. Now, he went to two major gun rights organizations. He can't afford them. They wouldn't support him because they couldn't take him on as a client.
So it's more of a money-making thing for them rather than a gun rights
Yes.
thing. But we won't name these organizations.
I'm not going to name these
But we can
organizations.
probably guess.
But
Yeah.
I approached them myself, and they said, we got to find a client so we can collect money. What?
Yeah.
I said, this is something that needs to be done. So I took it upon myself, and because I'm a consultant, but I don't have the horsepower of these national organizations.
Yeah.
So I went to ATF, and I put the letter in, discussed 2010-10, discussed the landmines in these rulings. And here's the thing. This serves no purpose. It is not a law enforcement issue. It's not an interstate commerce issue. It is no purpose than to arbitrarily make a select group of people change their license and knowingly lose their occupation because they reside in a communist state.
So, I mean, it's simple, but it's not simple in the fact that, yes, the Second Amendment is the primary gun law of the federal government, the Constitution. But because states do have rights, they also have the ability to inhibit the rights of the others because, as it says in the Bill of Rights, anything not, I don't know the exact wording, but anything not in the Constitution can be extrapolated to the states have the rights to do that. And we have some state governments where, whether it be control or a false sense of safety, and as we very well know, there are a lot of people who either deliberately are ignorant about firearms or have been convinced to believe that a firearm itself is a demonic being that just goes out killing people indiscriminately. However, and that's a little bit of hyperbole, obviously, but no matter how mild it is, they have voters who elect people who they know want to destroy gun businesses in Maryland.
That's the simplest way to put it.
And whether that's a small business or not, it doesn't matter to them. Their ideology is more important than, let's say, a Rick Vasquez living in Maryland trying to make revenue and support his family. Their ideology goes ahead of that. And unfortunately, as you said, there are people in ATF who their ideology preoccupies them from enforcing actual federal law. So they would rather write their own law.
So let me tell you what else is in this law that kind of shows that opinion is an arbitrary opinion.
It is an arbitrary.
It is an arbitrary opinion. It's just a personal opinion.
Yeah.
Because out of this rule, they now say if a gunsmith takes in a personal firearm and he keeps it overnight, he must put a serial number on that firearm that does not belong to him, that's in there only for repair.
Even if it didn't previously have a
Correct.
serialization. Okay.
And if it does not have a serial number, he can take it to a plaque maker, an unlicensed person, to put a serial number on it. Engraving, that's engraving, a serial number is a part of the regulations. And to engrave a firearm, you must be licensed to accept these firearms. So here they are arbitrarily breaking their own statutes by saying, Rick takes this to Joe the gunsmith and says, look, my gun's not working. And Joe the gunsmith says, I can't work on it today. Leave it here overnight. That gunsmith cannot take it in overnight unless he takes it to somebody to engrave a serial number on it. And it does not have to be a licensed gun dealer.
Yeah.
He can take it to a plaque maker. So that tells me that ATF could today say, all right, we're going to not hold engraving as manufacturing. They can just arbitrarily say it because it's not in the statute. It's not in the regulation. It's just in the notes in the framer receiver rule that came out. Now I've gone to a person in ATF to look into this, and she's very competent. I'm hoping that we can get this overturned, but I don't think it's going to be overturned because I think these things are not getting to the people that are coming to the Attorney General's office. I think they're going to the stagnant ATF attorneys that wrote this rule. So if anybody hearing this podcast wants to call their director, their congressman, their senator, their attorney general, and bring this issue up to them, feel free to do so, because our national gun rights activists will not bring this up unless somebody is a client and has a pay-in way.
Yeah, and I would also offer this, Dad, is if your congressman isn't getting back to you, call a different congressman. I was in a situation several years ago where I was trying, or I had contacted my congressman, whoever was the congressman of Loudoun County 12 years ago, about some stuff that I was dealing with. And his assistant was, as you would say, Playboy 99, some Middle Eastern American dude who was a Republican. But the moment I said that not enough was done, he started crying at me, because he had to make his winery on the weekend. If I remember his name, I'd name drop him because he needed to get physically dropped because of what a human garbage he was. I don't even know if my stuff even entered the congressman's office, might have not just been his assistant. That's a reality. So, for example, if I lived in Dan Crenshaw's district, I wouldn't contact Dan Crenshaw because we already know he's a, as the right leaders say, he's a rhino or whatever he is, all about his stock options. My congressman, Brandon Gill from the 26th district, new congressman, a guy who was on the Hill making a name for himself, getting himself done. Heck, I would never contact John Cornyn. He's another uniparty Republican. I'd contact Ted Cruz, contact a senator. Basically, and I'm guilty of this, arguing guns on X, talking guns on X, telling everyone, whenever you're doing this on X, you're making yourself look like a clown, But also, when I'm not doing that, if I have an issue, I think the government is my tool because they should be. So I know that I have a junior congressman who's trying to make a name for himself. I know that if I need to reach out to him about something, and I think just hearing back from your congressman or hearing nothing, if it's something you're passionate about firearms, right? If you're passionate about it, you were doing something about it, whether it's expert testimony, whether it's writing amicus briefs. I think a lot of these guys, they'd rather just spend their time online, arguing whether a 5.56 or 7.62 is better, arguing about whether you should have a flashlight on your gun, arguing about how much range time you have, etc. You can do all that, but then whenever it's time to log off, go and write an email to your congressman. If you know your congressman's in town, ask for a meeting with him. Show documentation, and hell, take screenshots of the conversations you've had with other gun owners on X or Facebook or Blue Sky or Threads.
Well, one thing I would say is the only organization I would recommend is the Gun Owners of America. They're not perfect by no means. So if you're interested in getting things changed, they have to get paid also.
Yeah.
I do a lot of stuff for GOA for free. They call me and I give them information. And as a matter of fact, I'll call his name out, Rob Olson, finally said, give me an invoice, because I did so much work for them over 2 years that he wanted to pay me.
Well, and that's the thing, I will give a credit to a lot of the gun goons on X. And I say that as an affectionate term, because even though I do mock some of the things they do, these people really do believe in 2A. And to me, that makes them good citizens, even if they're goofy otherwise. They do recognize now that Gun Owners America is one of the places that you really can rely on.
And reach out to them and say, hey, I saw Rick Vasquez's podcast, and I'm interested in sending him money. I'm interested in you guys fighting these these battles. They are fighting a lot of battles right now, but I would tell you, other than them, other organizations collect a lot of money to pay immense salaries to write an article after the fact.
Yeah.
They always write this beautiful article about what's being done, and we're doing this and we're doing that, when they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
So if you're giving money, make sure you give it to the right person. And one thing, kind of comical, kind of not, I'd like to address is that I am a world-class FUD. And we discussed this before. And the way I'm going to address this is, it doesn't matter what you use to shoot a firearm as a tool.
Yes.
What matters is that you practice. So don't be misled or kowtowed into buying something that you don't need.
Yeah, and I'm not going to push back, but I will give you. See, a lot of the people in the gun community, be they online or real life, will say, "Well, who are you to tell me what I do or don't need?" And it's like, I'm not. But if you're spending money to buy every new and updated optic, and if you're a millionaire, by all means, buy every single one, buy your own range. But if you're making in that $50,000 to $200,000 a year range, and you don't own your own range, and you want to have some range time, think, well, do I need this new ACOG? Do I need this new red dot? Or is the red dot I've had for 5 years that they were talking about in some gun magazine absolutely fine for what I need?
Well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you just choose what you want.
Yeah.
And don't listen to what other people tell you.
Yeah.
Just choose what you want and practice shooting and become a great shot.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is I've noticed there is a subset of the gun community, especially on X, that is very ACAB, anti-law enforcement. Just because you served in the military doesn't mean I should listen to you about guns. I couldn't agree more. Some of the biggest experts we know in the world never served in any capacity. But to say one, we mentioned him the other day, I think it's Iraq War vet, 8888, something like that, right? He's a gun tuber. He's a veteran. But he also knows a lot about guns. So just because, you didn't serve and you have a chip on your shoulder because you don't want to listen to a veteran, whatever reason, I don't know, maybe your dad was a veteran and he beat you. I have no clue, right? Whatever it is, don't dismiss, just like I don't dismiss someone who didn't serve if they're a military historian. Like if they're telling me about some battle that occurred during my lifetime that I had friends fight in, if they're an expert and they did their research, I'm not going to dismiss them because they didn't serve during that time. And I notice a lot of the people in the community, especially the ones that are really big on gear, they're in the militia industrial complex, right? Hey, no criticism from me. If that is something you came into later in life and you are all about fighting what you think is a tyrannical government or preparing to fight a tyrannical government, by all means, you can do that. But I think people try to invent dividing lines. People try to create drama where there doesn't necessarily need to be. And I jokingly used to call myself the chancellor of Gun X, and I still post my decrees. And it's a joke. And I've had people come in my profile and think, oh, this guy seriously thinks he knows something. What does he know? Because everyone has to discount someone else. I'm not an expert. Why am I not an expert? Because I know the expert. You know what I mean? Like, if I have a question of firearms, do you think I go ask it on X? Who do I ask, Dad?
The kitty cat.
I ask you.
The FUD.
I ask you because I'm not an expert. And what's interesting to me is my experience both in the military and afterwards. Optics were not a thing. I have shot. I can count on one hand how many times I have fired a gun with the newer optics, not a scope, obviously. And once was in North Carolina. I think John Winslow's old property. I don't know if it was an ACOG or a red dot because it's been that long. I shot that on his farm. And then whenever I bought a Sig Sauer red dot, God, several years ago, to put it on an AR-15, and I shot it once, and that's it. So clearly, I'm not anti-red dot. I'm not anti anything, but I will push back on some of the people they label as FUDs also, who insist the only gun you should ever carry is a 7 or 8 shot 1911. Guns have advanced since that time.
Preference, whatever you want to carry, carry.
And you'd probably agree it would be more about shot placement than the caliber.
Well, caliber does help.
I mean, if you're getting shot with a 50 caliber versus a 22, obviously.
Exactly, at 380 and shot placement, I hit him right in the center of the chest with 380. But if I hit him in left side, right side with a 45,
you're going to have a different level of cavitation.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So shot placement is important. Caliber is important. Everything's about personal preference.
Yeah.
But I like talking about this fuddery because it makes me laugh.
Well, they automatically assume that since you're a boomer, that you're also a FUD.
Which I am.
Yes.
I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
But back to what we're doing, because I know we have limited time today, what we were discussing earlier. If there's any questions in your mind, don't hesitate to reach out to your congressman. I would definitely reach out to Gun Owners of America, go online, join them, because they are the ones putting up the best fight. And I would say to reach out to me, but I get so many emails.
Well, Dad, also, they could message you on X or comment on X and saying, "Hey, can you contact me?"
Yes.
And we check that daily just to make sure if there is, if you do come across his profile or mine, and you have questions regarding, like, let's say you are facing some prosecution or you don't want to face prosecution, ask some questions.
And I am a paid consultant, so I do charge, but general questions I'll answer. And a lot of people who want to hire me, I just give them the answer ahead of time because I know they're going down the wrong path. And I just said, no, I'm not going to charge you. This is the regulations. This is the statutes. Basically, don't do what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, when I just get emails or cold calls out of the clear blue, I'll ask for a reference because I know that I've been called by federal agencies, because when I tell them I'm going to send a contract before we get talking, I never get a call back. And I said, well, part of the contract is a non-disclosure agreement. And as soon as I bring up a contract and non-disclosure, they seem to disappear.
So it's probably a Fed trying to fish. Right?
Absolutely, no doubt on my. And the government will lie to you.
And they're legally allowed to lie to you, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Hey, Dad, you got anything else you want to talk about?
Shoot straight and shoot a lot.
And I always say Mozambique, pelvic girdle, shot placement.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye.